Hi, I'm Christina Crowley-Arkley. I'm a Canadian dairy farmer's daughter, strategic marketing and communications entrepreneur, and your host for Country Guides podcast series. With a renewed focus on your farm, your conversation, I sat down with farmers across Canada to talk about their stories of success and failure, what keeps them going every day, and how they're positioning themselves and their farm for generations to come. All right, let's get into it. Julie, thank you so much for joining me here. So glad to have this conversation with you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So good to connect.
I feel like you and I are going to have a lot to talk about from our backgrounds together of knowing each other previously, but all the stuff that you've been up to. So let's maybe just start with where you and your husband Kyle farm and how many acres and what the whole farm life looks like to kind of set the foundation for the audience.
Sure. So I farm with my husband and my 3 boys. So we farm just outside of Corright, Ontario, so just south of Sarnia, so on a bordering town. We have a custom farming business as well, and I also own and operate a seed dealership. So we've kind of got a little bit of everything going on. We're lucky we have family still involved in our business, and it's all feed in. Everyone's helping, everyone's taking part, and yeah.
And what I guess in terms of like the family factor and all this, did you both come from farms? Was it a natural, again, when you guys got together that cash cropping was going to be something that you did? You know, how did it both lead you to where you are today?
If I was completely honest, I'd tell you this was not the path I was headed down.
Yeah? Okay.
So I took in school, sports was my thing. I took sports management and was headed to the big city sports team doing my thing.
You were supposed to work for the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Sure, everyone's got goals, right? So I did work in the OHL for a little bit with the local London Knights team, and then did the arena side of things and loved it. Is it the life for a family and lifestyle I was looking for? Once I got it, I realized maybe not. Had a lot of fun, great experience, great opportunity, but just not something that's maybe family oriented for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, headed into farming, did finance for a little bit in ag lending and loved it. But then just with kids and school buses and all that fun stuff, I returned home to farm. So did I come from a farm family? Not directly. My parents both came from farm families, but decided to choose other paths.
Yeah.
Grandparents had a dairy farm, and I was very passionate at that time. Wasn't able to help much because back then, girls and women weren't really part of that scenery, right? I think it was more, I don't think it was a matter of they weren't allowed or that wasn't accepted, but it was a safety thing. They were just concerned, I think. But that was my passion. I loved it. And then, met my husband, and we ended up, farming together and loving it, and we work really well together.
Amazing.
We're a business.
and what do you think makes you guys work well together? Because that's obviously a reality for a lot of couples on the farm in across Canada, working with your partner. Some people can't always say that they love working with their partner or that they're good at working together. So what is it that makes you guys both work well as a team?
I think it's the business aspect. So we probably run our marriage, our lifestyle like a business.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for everyone. It works for us. We get along really well farming together. Like, sure, don't get me wrong. There's been few words said to each other at the time. But at the end of the day, we're both have the same passion.
Yeah.
And I think kids has just escalated that passion, because will our kids farm one day? I don't know. And that's not an expectation for our kids, but we want the opportunity for them to be there and to see what we do. And so they're part of our farm. Maybe some days they don't have a choice whether they ride with us. But it's really neat to see our kids farm with us now.
Yeah, I bet.
We have an 11-year-old who is not road worthy to drive yet, but is farming with us in the field. The other 2 are younger, and they're in the tractor with us. And not every day is rosy, but I think, we treat it like a business.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few more SWOT analysis that you guys do within your marriage, within the business, than maybe a few other couples. I mean, so what do you guys grow on the farm? Like, how many acres? So what do you?
So we have acreage of our own, so a couple hundred acres of our own.
Okay.
And then we rent some ground as well and have a custom farming business.
Yeah.
Are we the largest farmer there? No, but we are your average, small town farmer. Trying to make a go of it, just like everybody else. Right?
Yeah.
So we'd like to grow, but then there's also those limits of how much can you handle. And so we're respectful of that to make sure we're not doing too much and staying within.
And so what made you get set up in Courtright then in your area? If you weren't necessarily from the area, is that where, how did you decide to set up shop?
So I grew up, I like to say North Lambton, Wyoming area, and moved, I say, to the sunny south because it does not snow there like it does in Wyoming. So it is Kyle's grandparents' farm. His grandparents started it, then his parents, and then we purchased the farm from them. So it's a generational farming operation. And we are passionate about that. We honor that. It's a great opportunity to carry that tradition.
Do you think back to those days when you and Kyle were getting started, and how scary they most likely were, that you were going all in on this idea when you came home, right, with small kids? And did you ever have that moment where you had to talk with someone or someone shared a piece of advice with you that kind of propelled you to know that you were making the right decision or that you were going all in on something and there was no turning back? Like any moment that you can remember or any piece of advice that you'd share with listeners that kind of turned things for you?
I think, when you're starting out, right, you're getting married and then you see that farm mortgage, right? And that's thousands of dollars and you go, oh, I'm 2 feet in. Right? And
can't turn back now.
And I think it's definitely a lifestyle. Farming is a lifestyle for sure. Because there is no 9 to 5 schedule. And so it's a commitment to the lifestyle. Is there anything? I'd have to say it's the passion, probably, the interest in agriculture that carries you, right? Because there is good days and there's bad days. But you have to find that balance too, and what works, especially with young kids. It's not easy. I will be the first person to say, and there's no, we call it the magic pill, but there's no book you can read on what makes it easy, right? There are good days and bad days. And I think you just need to be there for each other. You got to be open. Communications, it has to probably be, it's no different than work. When you're in a job, you need to communicate with people, right? With your manager. It's the same idea. And I think those are the types of things we have brought home to communicate, so everything's on the same page, right? And there's no misleading, expectations.
And so in terms of, I guess, where do you guys see from a growth standpoint? I mean, a lot of farmers talk about growth, and there's pros and cons to growth, right? Growth is also not necessarily the benchmarker of success either. Do you guys have any farm plans with where you want to go? If you want to grow a number of acres, you want to change what you're growing, like, is there any do you guys have those conversations?
We definitely have those conversations. Does that mean that's going to happen tomorrow? No, but we've talked about whether that's, trading of equipment or adding more acres. So that's something we talk about. We try to be prepared as much as we can, right? On the financial side of things, work towards things, have kind of a plan. This is kind of where we'd like to be the next 5 to 10 years. Will that happen? No, but we assess that in 5 years and go, okay, this is working, this is not, and adjust accordingly. And I mean, anyone that's had kids knows that throws a different loop. Right? And the commit with kids. Farming isn't everything, right? And we want our kids to have a balance. So whether that's sports, whether that's things with their friends, we want to make sure they kind of have that balance. So it's a working ship. And it changes as we go. But I think it's important to we talk about success planning, right? And succession, right? To have those goals every, whether that's 2-year goals where you want something to be in, within the year, and then sit down and evaluate how are we doing.
And so, I mean, I guess because you obviously take a very active role in your community too. So it's one thing to be a good farmer, a good business partner with your husband, which it seems like you and Kyle are. But you also, you are very committed to your community and what you do. And not a lot of people can be that well-rounded, if you will, right? Run their farm, run their marriage, be involved. And I guess, how do you personally, when I'm thinking of the people who are listening, like, how do you personally decide what to say yes to, what your boundaries are, where to put your time and energy? Because that's the hottest commodities that we have is time and, right? Time and
finding that balance is probably one of the hardest things. For me, it's my out. right? It's a change of scenery. It's something different. It's an opportunity for me to use those skills that I thought I was going to use in the big city in the sports industry, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's event planning for a local organization and taking those skills and helping an organization that maybe might not be able to afford to bring someone in,
Yeah.
right? I think being part of your community is huge, right? That's something I was very lucky my parents instilled in me. My mom was very active in the community. And so you grow up with that, right? It's a natural, but I also want our kids to understand that, right? What you do in your community and give back. And I think that's where I find my balance. You got to be careful though. You can't be that yes person.
Yeah.
And I've lived it. I've been that yes person, but it's just too overwhelming and you have to find that balance.
Yeah.
And I think you got to sit down and look at your priorities. What is the most important thing you would like to do or you would like to accomplish?
Yeah.
And then where does everything else fit? And then balance your time from there. And that's something I've tried to really look at the last 2 years because you can't do everything. It'd be nice, right? But I can't be a mom and a farmer and a board member all at the same time. So I got to figure out how I'm going to manage that. And for me, some of these volunteer opportunities and these boards are kind of my break to be me, as well as be a mom.
And so, I mean, your experience is really unique because just recently you joined the Grain Farmers of Ontario board, and I believe you and one other female board member are the first female board members on the Grain Farmers of Ontario board.
Yes.
From what I understand. So let's get into that conversation as we're talking about boundaries and time well spent and deciding what to give yourself the out on. How did you decide to get involved in the grain farming board, and how do you balance all that?
It's not easy.
Yeah.
So everyone will say, oh, I don't know how she does it. Or, oh, the biggest line I love is, you're so busy. I am, but I think it's a good busy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's all how you can manage your time, right? If you're staying up all hours of, which I do that too, but that's more because the brain doesn't shut off.
Yeah.
But I think it's, finding that balance. How did I get interested in it? I started selling seed, did not know that I would love doing that. I went from lending money to farmers in the financial world to selling seed and loved it. And so it was an opportunity to work with farmers. Someone had said, hey, I think you should come out to a meeting. And that led to, we'll just nominate you for a position. And so I got it involved locally. And I think that's a great opportunity is you can be involved locally, but it's not a huge commitment.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity to dip your feet in, kind of see what it's all about. Without committing a lot of time. Joining the board now, you can be as involved or not involved. It's what you want to get out of it personally. That's what I encourage people. No different than volunteering with your local Girl Guides or hockey association locally. You can be as involved as you want to be. It's what you want to get out of it at the end of the day.
And so what do you think motivated you when, obviously it sounds like you got involved locally, you knew that, it sounds like you're obviously good at sales and your customers trusted you, hence why it helps you as you're building your credibility, your reputation with farmers. And then all of a sudden you start, committing your time locally to maybe the Grain Farmers organization. Then all of a sudden when they said, I think you'd be a great person to run for the board provincially. What motivated you? What's behind all that?
At first I wasn't sure. I'm like, oh, you really think I can do that?
Yeah, you're giving me the tap. Yeah.
But I think it's relationships. When you go back to the sales world, when you go back to anything, I think my biggest focus has always been relationships. And if you can build those relationships and move those, I've always had a passion for agriculture and I've tried to be an advocate because I think if we don't tell our own story, someone else will, and that might not be the story we want out there. So I've always tried, and it was an opportunity I saw to tell our story and support our farmers both locally and provincially. And so I thought, let's give it a whirl and see, where it takes me. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And the passion's there. And we'll see what happens.
You've been on the board for how long now?
Since February.
So just of this year.
Yeah.
And in terms of any advice that someone gave you along the way as you were running, or once you won the seat and you were in the board, any advice that someone shared to say, this is how I've benefited from a position, or here's what if I were you, this is what I would do. Any type of advice like that?
Don't shy away from opportunities, right? give it a try. What is the worst that's going to happen? You're not going to like it, or someone says no, right? So
Failure, which some
Right.
people don't like maybe as much. It sounds like you're maybe more,
It's a challenge for me.
Yeah,
Right? Like,
yeah.
I play games in my head, right? That to me, that's a game, right? Like, okay, I can get there, right?
Yeah.
Someone also said you got to set goals, right? And both personal goals of where you want to be, what you want to get out of something. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
So if you're doing something and you're not loving it, if you're taking part in something and it's work, then you're not in the right spot.
Yeah. So you feel like the time that you're spending obviously on the Grain Farmers of Ontario board now is something that complements what you do at home on the farm with your business partner who's your husband, but also with your seed business too. Like it doesn't feel like it adds to your plate. If anything, it like you benefit from the work that you're doing or the time that you're spending with these board members.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the kind of the relationship piece comes into play. Is just building those relationships and continuing that not only locally, but abroad.
Yeah. And it probably helps too with the farmers that you represent with your seed business and knowing what you do and kind of keeping, your boots on the ground with hearing things like that only also helps you in your role as a board member too, right?
It does. It's
Yeah.
a lot of the same things,
Yeah.
right? And it's not for everyone,
Yeah.
and there's lots of behind the scenes people that make things happen.
Yeah.
So I think there's not only those people that are in those positions, but it's also people behind the scenes that help those people.
Yeah.
That makes it a success.
Yeah. And what have you what has surprised you, I guess, in the last few months since you joined the board? Like what have you feel like you've learned, or you didn't know and you had to learn, like anything that has shocked you? Because I think a lot of farmers are apprehensive of joining a board, and we know in our industry how important commodity organizations are and how important our boards are, and yet a lot of our farmers shy away from getting involved. And we see the same people, the same faces, and yet we need new people like yourself, new ideas, new blood, new ways of thinking. So I guess what have you learned or what has surprised you in the last while that you would share with other people? And
One of the biggest things is I can't get over how many people have reached out. I would have never guessed the amount of farmers that pick up the phone and call me, whether it's a question for something
Yeah.
in regards or just, oh, hey, I'm glad to see, you're taking part. Just
encouragement sounds
people,
like.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been overwhelmed, especially even when I did the seed business. I wasn't sure, a woman entering the seed business when, the society, it's a guy's world, right? And I wasn't sure, would I be accepted into that world? And I've been very lucky. And I've been very upfront with people. I might not know the answers, but I will find a way to find out for you.
Yeah, which is a great way of approaching it. Are you still surprised in the day that we're living in, Julie, that like we're still talking about how women are living in a man's world in agriculture and food? Like, does it surprise you knowing you're a business owner, you run that farm along with your business partner? A lot of women are the reason why farms in Canada are what they are and how they're succeeding.
Totally. Like, it's a team.
Yeah.
Like, as much as you may see that male figure on the outside, like, that guy wouldn't be there without the meals on the table or scheduling kids. And that's, I think, how we are successful in our marriage or
Yeah.
our family, is because we're a team. And it takes our entire team to make that tractor go out the laneway.
Yeah.
Right.
Something
And
you
I
also
think-
drive the tractor too, right? It's not, so.
So I think, but in order for everything to happen, and that's the approach we've taken with our kids. If you want to be part of something or do extracurricular activities, you need to take part and pull your weight to make it all happen. And
Yeah.
I think that team approach is so important, both on the farm, but in an organization. It takes a team
Yeah.
for that organization to be successful. And I think the more of the eyes we take out, right, and add the team approach is so important.
Do you think that's something that you're bringing to the table when you're approaching, your Grain Farmers of Ontario board work is thinking about collaboration, thinking about the teamwork? It sounds like you're not in it for a personal agenda.
No.
You are there for the farmers that you're representing.
For sure.
What-
One of the things that drives me crazy is silos. I hate when you hear of the silos and the different organizations. Oh, we can't work together. Well, if we work together, right, we can save half the cost,
Yeah.
right, on some projects. I'm not saying everything has to be collaborated, but there's opportunities. We're doing the same thing. Why do we have to do it twice?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I hope to bring to the table. And then involving other people.
Yeah.
There might be someone that's sitting at the back that's just not sure, right? And I want them to feel involved, right?
Yeah.
I want them to feel comfortable to take part.
Yeah.
And that's important to me.
And so what excites you about agriculture and food? Because a lot of people, it's funny, whether you when you meet a farmer and maybe they seem a little bit more like negative in their approach to, it's hard times, Mother Nature's not been kind this year, etc. There's some different approaches of how we look at agriculture and food. And I guess for you, what excites you about our sector, and why are you in it for the long term?
I try not to focus on the things I can't control.
It's been a common theme as we've talked to people on the podcast.
And I think that's part of mental wellness too, right? It's hard, and some days are not easy. And I think focusing on the things I can control, right, and taking my time to do that rather than the time that takes of the things I can't control is kind of my focus.
Okay.
I try to take a positive approach because, let's be honest, when you're in a room, you don't want to be with that negative person.
Yeah.
And that negative person brings you down, right? So I try as much as I can. I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah.
Is to give that positive approach so that if I can make one difference in someone's life, that's kind of my goal.
And do you find the conversations that it sounds like you're having with your farmers when they call you for encouragement or to find an answer? I mean, do you find that you're able to really make their day or change their day if they're asking about a tougher question or a tougher situation or what's going on at GFO with a certain strategic priority, and you're able to kind of calm them and make them feel better, that you're that's a win because I'm now helping with my positivity for the next farmer.
I try.
Yeah.
And that's where I say I may not have the answer because I'm not the expert, right? The person making that phone call probably knows more about farming than I do, have been at it for 30 plus years, right? But it's my job to find them an answer.
Yeah.
And in a timely manner. And I think if I can give that positive feedback to them or, hey, you're doing a great job, right? That's what they need, right? And I think that's just people taking part. I encourage people to ask someone, right? Ask someone to be involved because people are sitting there, right? And they just want to be asked.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of volunteers and people getting involved.
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about that theme a lot lately because it feels like there's a lot of anniversaries of fairs and events, and the Ontario Agricultural College at the University of Guelph, 150 years next year. There's a lot of those 50th anniversary, 100th anniversary, 150th anniversary. I'm always thinking what were these people thinking back all those years ago when they started something? And did they know that what they were starting now was going to be something that we were benefiting from 150 years later? And I'm always, I'm sure as a volunteer, you're thinking about this all the time. Where do I give of my time and energy? Is it going to be something that's sustainable and worth it in the long run? How do we get more people involved? I mean, I'm sure that this is something you think about all the time.
For sure. And I think it's tough for organizations because now more than ever, people are society is busy, right? And people are busy with their own lives, and it's hard to get people involved.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the passion comes into play. And I think with passion comes a balance, and that's where you can pick where you spend your time.
Yeah. To your point about silos, which I really appreciate that comment. And I mean, does it frustrate you as a farmer in the industry when you see divisiveness, even between, I mean, there could be east and west type green farmers, right? The way that we farm here in Ontario can be vastly different, just in farm size and acreage alone, than what you see out in a certain province in out west, and certain commodities. How do you approach that type of silos and divisiveness when you know that you want to do that collaboration more?
Oh, for sure. And I get there is some times where they're separated, especially sometimes in the farm organizations. But I think that's where relationships are important, right? Is talking to those people, right? Maybe that's outside of those organizations and making those relationships. This is what we're working on. What are you working on, right? And just trying to bring that together.
Yeah. I mean, how much do you feel like your time on GFO, is there something that strategically they're focusing on that you're I want to get behind that and go all in on? Some people join a board for a certain reason, whether it's mental health. I mean, GFO's been wonderful in terms of leading that conversation for the industry. They've been amazing in the diversity, equity, inclusion conversation. Is there something that the board is working on that, again, adds to why you're volunteering your time and effort to the board?
Yeah, there's a couple things. Obviously, women's important, right? I just want everyone to feel like they can take part. There isn't really boundaries, whether that's age, whether that's your gender, whether that's your experience.
Yeah.
I want it inclusive so that everyone has that opportunity should they wish to take part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe, like, it's 2023. And so the fact that we had our first 2 females on GFO's board, I mean, that's an amazing milestone.
Yeah.
I just can't believe it took till 2023, right? Like,
And there was women involved.
yes, yeah.
And that's something I like to mention, right? It is at the very, very
On previous
first,
boards that
when before they amalgamated.
yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
The other thing I guess I would probably be passionate about is probably the government side of things. And that's where people shy away from.
Funny.
But I enjoy it.
I just think because I haven't talked about politics with many guests so far. I'm assuming that's what you mean by government is like.
Yes, and
yeah, okay.
understanding. I mean, that was a learning curve for me, and I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
And still learning, but I'm enjoying seeing how things evolve or don't evolve, right, in government and working with people within government.
Yeah.
Right, and so and educating them. You wouldn't believe the people that just don't understand what happens on a farm. Yes, they may think, oh yeah, that's where my food comes from, but not the process.
Yeah.
So I think that's what challenges me to connect with those people and tell our story.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like a day showing up to Queen's Park in downtown Toronto is a very worthy day for you where you're excited to go in and go in there with a mission and talk to them about what you do.
Yes. So we have like the plowing match coming up.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's an opportunity. And it kind of comes full circle, right, of being that ag advocate to tell our story.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't know that the Ontario plowing match is the only event that the House rises, like that the Queen's Park rises for all the members of provincial parliament to come attend the event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're eager, they want to ask questions, and that's our opportunity to connect.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I'm excited to add that knowledge and share our story.
I mean, you're a wonderful storyteller, so it'd be helpful to have someone like you telling the story. They'd probably listen. Whose responsibility do you think that is to tell these stories? Do you think it's our responsibility as a sector to get better at storytelling and find the mediums and the platforms and the ways to connect with more Canadians about our story? Or is it their responsibility to come out looking for information about us? I mean, because it sounds like relationships are very important to you, and this is an area where you focus on. If we were having this conversation about building public trust, where do you think we should meet? In the middle, or is it sometimes I feel like people feel like we need to do better at storytelling, and then other people feel like it's the consumer's responsibility to come to us to learn more.
It's a hard balance, right? I think starting in your grocery store, right? And farmers, just if someone's standing there, right, trying to decide, they may not know.
Yeah.
And just sharing, it doesn't have to be a media story. It can be that simple side conversation of this is where this came from.
Yeah, yeah.
Or this is where this is harvested, right?
Yeah.
Or this is grown in Ontario. This is grown in Mexico.
Yeah.
Right? Just that simple conversation. So it's a tough, right, whose responsibility it is. I think we should just both go full feet in and meet in the middle.
Yeah. And knowing that grain farmers too, especially benefit from both sides, that obviously the local narrative is wonderful to do, but then also trading to other countries is part of what makes our Canadian, grain industry
and it's
succeed.
Interesting, right? I'm hearing about the feedback from these trade missions, right? And what they love about Canadian grain.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so cool to see that, right?
Yeah.
And I'm leading a 4-H field crop club. And we're visiting various different locations, but we just recently visited a port, right? And the kids had the opportunity to learn where that grain's going all over the world. And I think you got to start them young.
Yeah.
And educate them and give them that opportunity.
What advice would you go back and I guess either give yourself or give, let's say, a 21-year-old who was loving sports management, thought they were going to be working maybe for Toronto Maple Leafs in downtown Toronto or something, and then end up where you are? Like, what advice would you give them to either be open to what's out there for you or open to agriculture and food? Like, what advice would you share?
Follow your passion, follow your goals, and don't take no for an answer. I
Love
think
that.
If you're truly passionate about something and you're willing to work hard, then I think the doors are open.
Yeah.
But you got to put yourself forward, and that's not easy for everyone.
Yeah.
But I think if you're willing to show that you can put that time in, the passion, then I think there's lots of opportunities out there.
Because we obviously, you and I would agree that like people are the are at the heart of our sector, right? We have the best innovations, the best technology, everything. But if we don't have the best people or enough people, our sector isn't what it is. I mean, you'll never replace people in agriculture and food. So how would you in the elevator pitch sell what you're doing and what our sector is to someone in, whether it's a rural community or an urban city, to say, like, we need you. Like, we need your talent, your skill set to get involved. What would you say?
Oh,
Sorry, that was a tough question. I know, I should give you a heads up on that one. But
yeah, no, I think using your strengths, right?
Yeah.
Again, I think if you go back to the basics, that's what I tell people. Go back to the basics of, learning to manage your time, be organized, right? And your passion to work hard, I think, are great strengths to do
a lot.
What you want
Yeah.
in life, right?
Yeah. And then how do you add on connect with people? I mean, and again,
relationships are huge.
Yeah.
And I think if I were to look back, I'm running into people I worked with 10 years ago, right? It's kind of come full circle, right? And you never know who you're going to meet.
yeah. And it sounds like that's probably something we don't talk about a lot, especially as we're talking about mental health and connecting with people. That's kind of the foundation to agriculture and food in this country.
It is.
Are the people, but also the relationships,
Yeah.
and how we've connected and how we've built things and, brought these organizations to fruition and kept a fair going for 150 years in your local community. Like, it's all because of people and the relationships that we've been able to keep. So,
sure.
yeah.
100%.
I mean, that's a scary thought when you also think about where people are going and where we're heading and all the challenges that are ahead. But it also excites me too, knowing that, like, we do have these incredible people. They're probably they're our greatest ingredient, if you will, of what our food system is.
For sure.
Yeah.
And you never know who you're going to meet around what corner, right? Or what they're involved in,
Yeah.
right? So, tell your story, share your connections with people. And I think what we tend to forget is be kind,
Yeah.
right? Like, it sounds silly,
Yeah.
but you just never know.
Yeah. I mean, any aspirations that you have for yourself long term that, like, again, if I threw out the idea, Julie, one day would you run in politics? Like, is there anything that you are already thinking about, or that you wouldn't be surprised that one day you could, that you'd land there? Like, anything that you're thinking of?
I don't know. I think this is a big step.
Yeah, yeah.
I would have never guessed if you had asked me 10 years ago, would I be sitting with the grain farmers of Ontario? No.
Yeah.
So I think, for me, I have goals for sure.
Yeah.
But right now we're just kind of taking life one step at a time. And with family, right? I don't know where that will lead, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's very helpful, obviously, to have a very supportive partner like you do, because
sure.
that's part of the, like, you can't go and, whether male or female, you can't go and be on a board, commit your time, be traveling if you don't, and be running a business at home if you don't have that support system behind you.
And that's where I can, it's a team approach, right? I'm very also lucky that my parents are very involved with my kids and are that support system as well, so that when we're both attending the farm show, stuff's still happening at home.
Yeah.
Just building your team, building your own support system, and for some people that's not family, that's friends, right?
Yeah.
Co-workers, build that team that can support you.
Yeah. I mean, to wrap up, any kind of final thoughts on what's the best piece of advice, I guess, that you've ever received from someone? Anything that stands out for you, that a university professor or mentor, someone that said something to you that, again, has kind of changed the trajectory of how you think, what you've kind of accepted? I mean, you mentioned about accept the things you can't control, which is very powerful.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, right, for a lot of people. But
For sure it is. I think just that mental mindset, and make sure you're doing something for you. If your heart's not in it, it's going to reflect accordingly.
Yeah.
And so, find something, whether that's a job, whether that's a relationship, find that thing you're passionate about, and it's got to work for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, it's refreshing to see someone like yourself, obviously taking this type of leadership role at your age, right? I mean, there's one thing to go, you can get all the schooling and go back to school for whatever, or go through the courses. But I always think of it as, you're saying, you're a 4-H leader. The motto of, like, learn to do by doing. And that's how you're doing this, by getting involved in a board. And the only way to learn board governance is by actually being involved, which is what you are.
And I will be the first person to say I'm not the expert. I did not go to school for agriculture, right? I'm learning as I go. And but I think if you have that passion and you would like to take part, that's, this great start.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a great, I feel like your story is one that we need to tell more of, because it's not only showing, again, the women in leadership roles, women being able to, balance what you do at home with business and in life, but also like making a way of living but also making a way of life for your family, and how you can achieve that as a woman. I think it's really powerful.
And I will be the first person to say it is not easy.
Yeah.
Because when I go out in that tractor, there is no one making meals inside, right? And I think that's probably one of the biggest struggles I had to overcome, is how the mom figure, the wife figure does that when there's no one to back up the mom.
Yeah.
Or the wife,
Yeah.
right?
You are the last person.
For sure, right? So
Yeah.
there's no one there to make me a meal or bring me a meal to the field, right? So
Some women do have wonderful cooks as husbands. They're
yes,
wonderful.
but they're in the field too.
Yeah, it's
right?
true.
So that was a big thing for me to overcome.
Yeah.
And I think it was just the mindset, if I'm going to do this, this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
And but I will be the first person to say it's not easy, but it's finding that balance as a mom, someone working, someone farming, is just finding that balance and really focusing on what's important to you.
Yeah. I mean, I love when podcasters ask this type of questions too. Like, how do you go and source information? Like, what's your favorite book, or where do you go to listen to podcasts, or like how do you either let your mind rest or let your mind go for growth and like to read and learn? Like, what?
I need to look up how to do that. I need to learn how to relax. I am not good.
You don't
at
go for
that.
walks, or like what do you do to de-stress? Okay, workout. That's good.
Running, that's my thing, right? Whether that's a treadmill, maybe that's going for a walk. That's my thing.
Super healthy.
I'm not good at just sitting and reading a book. It's important. I would love to be able to do it.
Yeah.
It's just not me.
You're also reading through a number of documents, I'm assuming, with your board positions. So,
but I'm a go personality, and so I think that's a way or an outlet for me that I can focus on.
Yeah. And I mean, do you listen to any podcasts, or do you listen to any radio stations, or you, again, take in social media in terms of to stay atop kind of things? Like how do you stay atop of the trends for our sector?
I'm really bad at it.
Yeah.
Social media.
At least you'll have one podcast to follow with Country Guide, but
Yes, I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Twitter's my thing, right? Just learning and just talking to people, whether that's a local radio station. I will be the first to say I am not good at it by any means, but just trying to I watch the local news, right? Just try to kind of stay connected a little bit. And then, I try to read the magazines.
At least read GFO's magazine, right? You gotta,
Yes, but I try to read the different articles of what's happening to kind of stay connected to what's new, what's on the way out.
I mean, it is one of the interesting things, I'm sure, is being a farmer yourself and then representing farmers and then being on a board also. It's like, again, how do our farmers take in information? How do they consume and digest things? Who do they turn to for influence when they have questions that they want to, be answered? Like, I find our sector fascinating in that way, but learning all that's why I'm in digital marketing.
And I think it's so diverse.
Yeah, now it is, for sure.
You have those ones that are reading the magazine, right? You have the ones that are on the website. You have social media. You have the ones connecting through Twitter.
Yeah.
Ag is different, right? And ag, there is not that set, I'm going to spend my marketing dollars here because everyone's using that. That doesn't happen in agriculture. So I think that's what makes it unique.
Yeah, we're a beast on its own, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Well, really appreciate the time today. I mean, keep just being you and leading the way you are. I mean, it's something that I don't even know some days, I'm sure it's great to hear that farmers are encouraging you, but you probably don't even realize how much you're trailblazing for other women and other farmers, just doing what you're doing, speaking up in the way you are, telling the story the way you are, running the business the way you are with your partner. I mean, this is what trailblazers do. So thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you for your kind words.
Yeah. And this was awesome to talk with you. Hope we get to do this again.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Country Guide podcast. Go to country-guide.ca for more great content to spark a conversation, and subscribe to the weekly newsletter to be notified when our next podcast episode is available.